A 6-month-old puppy walked into a hospital carrying a black bag she'd dragged for 12 miles. She was bleeding from her paws, trembling with exhaustion, but she wouldn't let anyone touch that bag until a doctor followed her back into the woods. What they found there, a trapped mother, a dying diabetic, and a 3-month-old baby, was a miracle. But the real story? This puppy had failed to save her first owner from the same fate. She wasn't going to fail again. If you believe dogs understand loss the same way we do, subscribe, because this is a story about second chances, and it will absolutely wreck you. The automatic doors of Street Clare General Hospital slid open at 6:47 a.m., and something impossible walked through. A golden puppy no more than 6 months old dragged a black canvas bag across the polished lobby floor. Each step left tiny smears of blood from her torn paws. Mud caked her legs. Exhaustion radiated from every trembling muscle, but her eyes burned with desperate, unbreakable purpose. Imagine this: you're starting your morning shift, coffee brewing, patience, waiting, everything routine. Then you see her, a puppy, alone, bleeding, carrying something she refuses to abandon. And when she looks at you, you don't see an animal. You see a messenger delivering the most important message of her life. Nurse Emily Carter dropped her clipboard. The puppy stopped 3 feet from the reception desk, set the bag down with shocking care, and let out a sound that made every person in the lobby freeze, a high, piercing whine that wasn't asking for help. It was demanding it. "Is that dog alone?" someone whispered. Security guard Reggie approached slowly, hands raised. "Hey there, buddy. Where's your owner?" The puppy grabbed the bag's strap in her teeth and backed toward the emergency wing corridor. Stopped, looked back, barked once sharp, commanding, "Follow me, now." Dr. Marcus Webb emerged from the ER, drawn by the commotion. 47 years old, 20 years in emergency medicine. He'd seen gunshot wounds, heart attacks, burns, crashes. But a bleeding puppy dragging a black bag through automatic doors. His instincts screamed that this wasn't random. "No collar," Reggie said quietly. "No tags. Just walked in." The puppy barked again, louder, more urgent, and pawed at the floor. Then she did something that made Emily's throat tighten. She Saturday lifted one paw, held it in the air. A trained gesture, a signal. "Please, someone is dying." Marcus knelt slowly, his doctor's eye catching details. The bag's zipper was partially open. Inside, something blue, something glass, the faint metallic scent of medical supplies. "This bag was packed by someone who knows medicine," he said. Emily crouched beside him. "You think someone's hurt?" The puppy grabbed the strap again and pulled toward the exit, her small body straining. When no one moved, she dropped the bag and ran to Marcus, pressed her bloodied nose against his hand, looked up at him with eyes that seemed impossibly old, eyes that had seen death before. Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. Every instinct he'd honed over 2 decades whispered, "Trust her." "Open the bag," he said. Emily's hands shook as she unzipped it. Inside, arranged with desperate precision, a baby blanket, infant formula, sterile medical supplies, and a folded piece of paper with 3 words scrawled across the top in shaky handwriting. "Please follow Hope." Beneath it, an address, Millers Grove Road, near Old Bridge. And one more line that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Diabetic emergency. Running out of time." The puppy Hope barked frantically and bolted toward the exit. Emily grabbed the bag. "We have to follow her." "That's 12 miles from here," Reggie said, already calling dispatch. "Through woods. No cell service." Marcus stood, decision made. "Then we leave now." Hope waited at the automatic doors, her entire body vibrating with urgency. When Marcus and Emily ran toward her, she turned and disappeared into the morning light. Behind them, the quiet hospital lobby erupted into motion calls made, units dispatched, protocols activated. But Marcus knew with bone-deep certainty they were Hope's real emergency response. Not the ambulances coming 20 minutes behind, because whoever packed that bag had trusted one thing above all else. A puppy who understood that when someone you love is dying, you don't stop running until you save them, or die trying. But what doctor? Marcus didn't know yet. What no one could have guessed was that Hope had already watched someone die this exact same way, and she'd been carrying that failure like a stone in her chest for 6 months. This wasn't just a rescue. This was redemption. The hospital's emergency vehicle tore down the empty morning roads, Doctor. Marcus, gripping the wheel, Emily beside him, clutching the black bag, and Hope perched between them on the center console. Hope didn't bark, didn't whine. She simply stared through the windshield with laser focus, and at every intersection she made her command clear: a sharp yip for left, 2 quick barks for right, silence for straight ahead. "She's navigating," Emily breathed. "Marcus," she memorized the route. 12 miles, through darkness, alone, carrying a bag half her weight. Marcus pushed the accelerator harder. As they drove, Emily opened the note fully. Her hands trembled as she read aloud. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 26, type 1 diabetic. Crashed my car avoiding a deer around 11 p.m. Phone died. No signal. Leg trapped under dashboard. Blood sugar dropping, can feel it. Baby Grace, 3 months is okay, but will need formula by morning. Hope is my dog. I adopted her 3 months ago. I know this sounds crazy, but please trust her. She's smarter than people think. I packed everything you'll need. The insulin is for me if I'm still conscious. If I'm not, just please save my baby. Millers Grove Road. Can't see the road from the crash site. We're down an embankment near the old stone bridge. Please hurry. I'm so scared." Emily's voice cracked on the last line. She wrote this while trapped, while dying. Marcus's jaw tightened. How long ago did the crash happen? The note doesn't say. But if Hope traveled 12 miles, Emily did the math, her stomach sinking. Even running, that's at least 2 hours. Add the time to reach the hospital, find us, and we're looking at 4, maybe 5 hours since the crash. Marcus's knuckles whitened on the wheel. If her blood sugar was already dropping when she wrote this, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Hypoglycemic shock could cause seizures, coma, brain damage, death. Every minute mattered. Hope barked, suddenly urgent, insistent, and Marcus slammed the brakes as they reached Millers Grove Road. The pavement dissolved into gravel, then dirt. Trees pressed close on both sides, swallowing the light. "How much farther?" Emily asked. Hope's answer was to leap through Emily's open window before the vehicle fully stopped. "Hope!" Emily shouted, grabbing the medical kit and chasing after her. The puppy moved like a golden blur through the underbrush, her bloodied paws leaving faint tracks in the damp earth. Marcus and Emily crashed through branches behind her, their breathing loud in the early morning quiet. And then they heard it. Faint, fragile, unmistakable, a baby crying. There. Marcus pointed to tire tracks veering sharply off the road. They followed them to the edge of an embankment, and there, 30 feet down, wedged against an oak tree, was an overturned silver sedan. Hope was already halfway down the slope, sliding, scrambling, refusing to slow. "Sarah!" Marcus shouted. No answer. They reached the wreck together. The driver's side window was shattered. Inside, slumped against the deployed airbag, was a young woman with dark hair matted with dried blood. Her eyes were closed, Her skin was grey-pale. Emily pressed fingers to Sarah's throat. Pulse is there, weak, thready. In the back seat, strapped into a car seat, a tiny baby screamed with the fury of the hungry and frightened. "Baby's unharmed," Emily called, her voice breaking with relief. But Sarah... Marcus checked her pupils' sluggish response. Her breathing was shallow. Classic signs of hypoglycemic crisis progressing toward coma. "We need glucose." Now, he tore through the black bag and found it a tube of glucose gel and sugar packets, exactly where someone with medical knowledge would pack them. "Sarah," Marcus said firmly, squeezing gel into her mouth and massaging her throat. "Sarah, stay with me." Hope pressed herself against the crumpled door, whining desperately. She pawed at Sarah's limp hand, licking her fingers, trying to wake her. "Please, not again. Please, not again." Seconds crawled by, like hours. Then Sarah's eyelids fluttered. "That's it," Emily encouraged. "Come on, Sarah. Come back." Sarah's eyes opened, unfocused, confused, and then locked onto Hope's face, pressed against the broken window. "Hope," she whispered. One word, barely audible. Hope's entire body shook, her tail wagged, once weak but real. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You did it." "Don't talk," Marcus ordered, checking her vitals. "Save your strength. Ambulance is 3 minutes out." But Sarah's gaze never left Hope. Her hand, trembling, reached through the gap in the shattered window. Hope licked her fingers frantically, whining. "Good girl," Sarah breathed. "Such a good girl." In the distance, sirens wailed, rescue teams, paramedics, the backup Hope had summoned with nothing but determination and a black bag. Emily lifted baby Grace from the car seat, wrapping her in the blue star blanket from the bag. The infant quieted instantly, sensing safety. As the first firefighters crashed through the underbrush, Marcus looked at Hope, this tiny, bleeding, exhausted puppy who'd done the impossible, and felt something crack open in his chest. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. "How did you know what to do?" Hope just leaned against Sarah's trapped hand, her eyes drifting closed. She'd completed her mission. But what none of them knew yet, what the rescue that followed would reveal, was that Hope hadn't just saved Sarah's life. She'd saved herself from a haunting that had followed her for 6 long months. If you think this is just about a loyal dog, you're wrong. What we're about to discover will change everything you think you know about grief, memory, and the debts we carry across lifetimes. The hospital room felt too small for the weight of what had just been saved. Sarah lay propped in the bed, her leg casted and elevated, IV fluids dripping steadily into her arm. Baby Grace slept peacefully in a bassinet beside her, tiny chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the innocent. And curled on Sarah's lap, finally allowed to rest, was Hope, bandaged paws, cleaned fur, but eyes that still held shadows. "Doctor!" Marcus stood near the window, watching the morning sun paint everything gold. Emily sat in the corner, unable to leave, as if walking away would somehow undo the miracle they'd witnessed. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said suddenly, her voice quiet but steady. "About Hope, about why she knew what to do." Marcus turned. "The rescue said you adopted her 3 months ago." "I did." Sarah's hand moved absently through Hope's fur. "From Second Chance, Animal Rescue. They told me she was found abandoned in a park. No history, no microchip, just alone." She paused, her throat working. "I was alone too. Grace's father left when I got pregnant. My parents stopped speaking to me when I refused to, when I chose to keep her." Her voice cracked. "I had nothing, 2 jobs, barely making rent. And then the diabetes diagnosis came out of nowhere. Type 1, aggressive onset." Emily leaned forward. "That must have been terrifying. I was drowning." Sarah's eyes glistened. The insulin costs alone were impossible. I couldn't afford medication and diapers and food. I was rationing my insulin, skipping doses to make it last longer. Her confession hung in the air like smoke. The night before I adopted Hope, I sat in my car outside the pharmacy, staring at a bottle of pills, thinking about how much easier it would be if I just... "Sarah," Marcus said gently. But I didn't. Sarah looked at Hope, fresh tears falling. Because the next morning I saw this ad. Second Chance Rescue was having an adoption event, and there was Hope's picture. This tiny, terrified puppy with eyes that looked exactly like mine, lost, alone, hanging on by a thread. Hope stirred slightly, pressing closer to Sarah's warmth. I spent money I didn't have on the adoption fee, brought her home, and Sarah's voice broke completely. She gave me a reason to wake up. Every single morning, she'd curl up right here. She touched her chest, and I'd feel her heartbeat, and I'd think, okay, one more day. For her, I can survive one more day. Emily wiped her eyes, her nurse's heart aching with recognition. She'd seen this before, the way animals could anchor people when everything else slipped away. So, when the crash happened, Sarah continued, when I realized my phone was dead and no one was coming, I looked at Grace screaming in the back seat, and I looked at Hope, and I thought, she's my only chance. Marcus frowned. But how did you know she'd understand? You said you never trained her for emergencies. Sarah's laugh was bitter and beautiful at once. I didn't train her for anything. I could barely afford dog food, let alone obedience classes. But Hope, she paused, remembering. Hope was always watching me, obsessively. If I stood up too fast and got dizzy, she'd press against my legs until I sat down. If I forgot to eat because I was too tired, she'd paw at me until I noticed her food bowl, as if reminding me to feed myself too. Emily's breath caught. She was monitoring you. I thought she was just anxious, clingy. But now... Sarah looked down at the sleeping puppy. Now, I think she was protecting me, like she'd been trained to protect someone else. The room went very still. Marcus felt pieces clicking together in his mind, pieces that didn't quite fit yet, but were trying to form a picture. Sarah, did the rescue tell you anything else about where Hope was found? Just that it was Riverside Park. Why? Marcus exchanged a glance with Emily. I need to make a call. He stepped into the hallway, pulling out his phone. 3 minutes later, he returned with a tablet in hand and an expression that made Emily stand up. What is it? She asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled up a file on the screen, an incident report from 6 months ago. Riverside Park, October 15th. A woman named Margaret Chen, age 67, collapsed during her morning walk. Cause of death, hypoglycemic coma leading to cardiac arrest. She was a type 1 diabetic. He looked up at Sarah. Paramedics arrived 14 minutes after the 911 call. It was too late. Sarah's face went pale. What does that have to do with... Margaret Chen had a dog with her when she collapsed, Marcus continued, his voice careful. A golden retriever puppy, approximately 3 months old at the time. The dog was found sitting beside Margaret's body, refusing to leave. Animal control eventually took the puppy to Second Chance Rescue. The air left the room. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! Sarah stared at Hope, her entire body beginning to shake. No, that can't be. Marcus turned the tablet around, showing them a photo attached to the incident report. It showed an older Asian woman with kind eyes and silver hair, kneeling in Riverside Park with a tiny golden puppy in her lap. The puppy's face was unmistakable. It was Hope. And in the background of the photo, barely visible, was a black canvas bag. That's the same bag, Emily whispered in shock. Marcus nodded slowly. Margaret Chen was a retired nurse. She worked at this hospital, Street Clare General, for 32 years. She specialized in emergency medicine and diabetic care. His voice dropped, and according to her family, she'd been training her puppy to recognize the signs of low blood sugar, to fetch her medical bag if she ever felt faint. Sarah's sob tore through the quiet room. Hope watched her die. Yes, Marcus said gently. Hope was there when Margaret collapsed. She would have seen the whole thing, the confusion, the seizures, the loss of consciousness. She would have understood that her person was in danger, and help came. But it came too late. Hope stirred in Sarah's lap, letting out a soft whimper in her sleep, as if the memories were surfacing even in dreams. When your crash happened, Marcus continued, Hope didn't just recognize the signs of a diabetic emergency. She remembered what happened the last time she saw them. She remembered what it felt like to be powerless, to watch someone slip away. Emily's voice cracked. She wasn't going to let it happen again. Sarah buried her face in Hope's fur, her shoulders heaving with sobs. She carried Margaret's training, Margaret's bag. She ran 12 miles because she remembered what it was like to fail. She didn't fail, Sarah, Marcus said firmly. Margaret's death wasn't Hope's fault. She was just a puppy. There was nothing she could have done. But she thought she failed, Sarah whispered. For 6 months she carried that. And when it happened to me, her voice dissolved. Emily crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, taking Sarah's hand. Hope saved you because Margaret taught her how. Because Margaret loved her enough to prepare her for a crisis, even if she didn't know it would save someone else's life one day. Sarah looked up, tears streaming. Margaret's last gift was training Hope to save me. Marcus felt his own eyes burning. In 20 years of medicine, he'd seen miracles. But this was something else entirely. A nurse who dedicated her life to saving people had died alone in a park. But her final act, training a puppy to recognize diabetic emergencies, had reached across 6 months of grief and loss to save a young mother and her baby. Margaret Chen's legacy hadn't ended with her death. It had just been waiting for the right moment to save one more life. Does Margaret have family? Sarah asked suddenly. I need to thank them. I need them to know that. Hope, I'll find them, Marcus promised. As if sensing the shift in the room, Hope's eyes opened. She looked up at Sarah, then around at the faces surrounding her, and for the first time since arriving at the hospital, her tail wagged. Not with desperation, not with urgency, but with something that looked almost like peace. Sarah pressed a kiss to Hope's head. You finished what she started, she whispered. You saved me with everything Margaret taught you. You're such a good girl. The best girl. Hope's tail wagged harder. And somewhere in a place beyond words, beyond time, beyond the veil that separates this life from whatever comes next, maybe Margaret Chen smiled. Because the puppy she'd loved, the puppy she'd trained, the puppy she'd prepared for a crisis she'd never lived to see, had become exactly what Margaret always believed she could be. A hero, a guardian, a light in someone's darkest moment. But what no one in that room knew yet was that Margaret hadn't just trained Hope randomly. In her final weeks, knowing her diabetes was worsening, Margaret had made specific preparations. And what those preparations revealed would turn this story from a rescue into something that felt almost like destiny. If your dog has ever seemed to understand your pain before you said a word, drop their name in the comments. Because what happens next will prove that the bond between souls, human and canine, is stronger than death itself. 3 hours later, just when everyone thought the worst was over, everything fell apart. Sarah had been resting peacefully, Hope curled beside her, when the first alarm sounded. Emily, who'd finally stepped out for coffee, heard the code over the intercom and felt ice flood her veins. Code blue. Room 247. Code blue. Room 247 was Sarah's room. She ran. When she burst through the door, chaos greeted her. Nurses swarmed around Sarah's bed. Dr. Marcus was already there, barking orders, his face grave. "What happened?" Emily demanded. "Internal hemorrhage," Marcus said tersely, his hands moving quickly. "Delayed complication from the leg injury. Femoral artery was nicked during the crash. We missed it in initial imaging because of the swelling. It's been bleeding slowly into the tissue. Now it's..." Sarah's monitors screamed. "Blood pressure plummeting, heart rate spiking. We need to get her to surgery now," Marcus ordered. "Call the OR. Tell them we're coming hot." The crash team moved like a well-oiled machine, but Emily's eyes went to Hope. The puppy had been shoved aside in the commotion, backed into the corner, eyes wide with terror. She was shaking violently, a low, continuous whine pouring from her throat. Emily had heard that sound before in the woods, when they'd first found Sarah. It was the sound of a soul watching someone they loved slip away. "Hope," Emily whispered, crouching down. But Hope wasn't looking at her. She was staring at Sarah's pale face, at the blood soaking through the sheets, at the monitors flashing red warnings. This was exactly how Margaret had looked before she died. "No, no, no," Emily breathed, realizing. "Hope, sweetie, this isn't..." Hope bolted. She shot past Emily, past the nurses, and threw herself at Sarah's bed, trying to climb up, trying to reach her, barking frantically. "Someone get that dog out of here!" A nurse shouted. "No!" Emily grabbed Hope before security could. "She's not leaving Sarah." "Emily, we don't have time," Marcus started. "Then take her with us." Emily's voice cracked with desperate authority. "This dog traveled 12 miles to save Sarah's life. She's not losing her now." Marcus's eyes met Emily's. For one impossible second, protocol warred with humanity. Humanity won. "She comes," he said. "Let's move." They rushed Sarah's gurney toward the OR, Hope running alongside, Emily keeping pace. The puppy's barks echoed through the corridors, desperate, pleading sounds that made every person they passed stop and stare. At the OR doors, a surgical nurse blocked their path. "Doctor Webb, you cannot bring a dog into... This dog saved this patient's life," Marcus said, his voice steel. "She stays until Sarah goes under." "That's not a request." The nurse hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside the pre-op area, as the anesthesiologist prepared Sarah, Hope pressed herself against the gurney, whining frantically. Sarah's eyes were half closed, consciousness fading, but her hand found Hope's head. "It's okay," she slurred, words slow from the pre-op sedatives. "I'm okay, baby. Her eyes rolled back. "She's going under," the anesthesiologist announced. "Let's move her." "No!" Hope barked sharply, trying to follow as they wheeled Sarah toward the surgical suite. Emily grabbed her, holding tight even as Hope thrashed. "You can't go in there, sweetie. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The OR doors swung shut. Hope went silent. For 3 terrible seconds, she just stared at those closed doors. Then she threw back her head and let out a sound Emily would never forget, a howl of pure anguish, the sound of a heart breaking for the second time. "Shh, shh," Emily whispered, sinking to the floor with Hope in her arms. "She's going to be okay. She's going to be okay." But Hope didn't believe her. Hope had heard those words before. 2 hours crawled by like centuries. Emily sat on the floor outside the OR, Hope trembling in her lap. The puppy hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound. She just stared at those doors with eyes that looked ancient with grief. Nurses brought water. Hope didn't drink. They brought food. Hope didn't eat. They brought a blanket. Hope didn't sleep. She just waited and remembered. Emily stroked her fur and whispered every comforting lie she could think of. But none of them reached the place where Hope had gone, that dark space where Margaret's death still lived, fresh and bleeding. At the 2-hour mark, Dr. Marcus emerged, still in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down. His face was exhausted. Emily shot to her feet, Hope rigid in her arms. She's alive," Marcus said quickly. "We repaired the artery, transfused 2 units of blood. She's stable." Emily's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Oh, thank God. But," Marcus continued, his expression darkening, "she's not out of the woods. The next 24 hours are critical. If there's any clotting, any infection, any rejection of the repair—" He didn't finish. Hope whined soft, broken. Marcus looked at the puppy, and his professional mask cracked. "I've seen a lot of things in this job, Emily, but watching that dog fight to stay with Sarah," his voice roughened, "that's not just loyalty, that's love. Pure, unfiltered love." "Can she see her?" Emily asked. "Can Hope see Sarah?" Marcus hesitated. "She's in recovery, still unconscious. It'll be hours before." Hope barked. Once, sharp, a sound that meant, "I don't care. I need to see her now." Marcus sighed. 5 minutes. But she stays calm and quiet. Emily carried Hope into the recovery room. Sarah lay pale and still on the bed, breathing tube removed, but monitors still beeping steadily. Bandages covered her leg, IVs snaked from both arms. Emily set Hope gently on the bed beside her. Hope didn't bark, didn't whine. She simply pressed herself against Sarah's side, rested her head on Sarah's chest, and closed her eyes, listening to the heartbeat, the steady, living, breathing heartbeat. For the first time in 2 hours, Hope's trembling stopped. She just needed to know Sarah's alive, Emily whispered, her own tears falling freely. Marcus watched from the doorway, thinking about Margaret Chen. About a nurse who'd spent 32 years saving lives, who died alone in a park with a puppy who couldn't save her. About that same puppy, 6 months later, refusing to let history repeat itself. "Sometimes," Marcus said quietly, "the bravest thing we can do is try again after we've failed. Even when we're terrified, even when it feels impossible." Emily looked at Hope, sleeping fitfully against Sarah's chest, and understood. Hope hadn't just saved Sarah's life. She'd saved her own soul from the weight of a failure that was never hers to carry. 4 hours later, Sarah's eyes opened. The first thing she saw was Hope's golden face, inches from her own, dark eyes watching her with fierce intensity. "Hope," Sarah whispered, her voice raw from the breathing tube. Hope's tail thumped weakly against the bed. Sarah's hand found Hope's head, fingers threading through soft fur. "You stayed." Hope licked her hand once, gentle, reverent, and Sarah finally understood something she'd missed before. Hope hadn't just saved her life in the woods. Hope was still saving it, every single day, simply by refusing to leave, by choosing, over and over again, to try again, to love again, to trust that this time, this person wouldn't slip away into the dark. "I'm not going anywhere," Sarah promised, her voice breaking. "I'm staying right here, with you, always." Hope's eyes drifted closed, and for the first time since Margaret's death, she slept without nightmares. Because this time, when she woke up, the person she loved would still be breathing. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the main lobby of Street Clare General Hospital, Grace strapped to her chest in a carrier, Hope beside her on a new leather leash. Her legs still ached. Physical therapy would take months, but she could walk, she could stand. She could hold her daughter and her dog and feel the weight of being alive. The lobby had been transformed. Hospital staff lined the walls. Local news cameras clustered near the entrance. And mounted on the wall behind the reception desk, gleaming under carefully positioned lights, was a bronze plaque. "In loving memory of Margaret Chen, RN 1957 to 20243. 2 years of dedicated service to Street Clare General Hospital emergency medicine and diabetic care specialist. Her final gift, training Hope, a puppy whose courage carried Margaret's legacy 12 miles through darkness to save a life her teacher could no longer reach. Love doesn't end when we die. It just finds new ways to save the people we would have wanted to protect. Margaret Chen, Sarah's vision blurred as she read the words. Beside her, Hope sat perfectly still, as if she understood the solemnity of the moment. "Doctor." Marcus stepped forward to address the gathered crowd, his voice carrying through the hushed lobby. Margaret Chen was one of the finest nurses this hospital has ever known. She saved countless lives within these walls. She mentored dozens of young medical professionals, and when she died last October, we thought her service had ended. He paused, looking down at Hope. But Margaret's final act, training a puppy to recognize diabetic emergencies, to fetch medical supplies, to seek help when her person couldn't, that act of love reached across 6 months of grief to save Sarah Mitchell and her daughter Grace. He gestured to Sarah, who stepped forward, tears streaming freely. "Margaret never met me," Sarah said, her voice shaking but strong. "She never knew my name, never knew I existed. But she loved her puppy enough to prepare her for a crisis she would never survive herself. And because of that love," her voice cracked, "I'm alive. My daughter is alive. We have a future because Margaret Chen refused to let her death be the end of her purpose." The crowd was silent, many wiping their eyes. Sarah crouched beside Hope. "Ready, girl?" Together, they approached the plaque. Sarah placed her hand on the cool bronze. Hope, trained carefully over the past 3 weeks for this exact moment, lifted her paw and placed it beside Sarah's hand. The cameras flashed, capturing the image that would appear in newspapers across the country. A young mother and a golden puppy, honoring the nurse whose love had saved them both. But Sarah wasn't looking at the cameras. She was looking at Margaret's engraved name, silently mouthing words only she and Hope could hear. "Thank you. Thank you for teaching her. Thank you for loving her. Thank you for giving her the tools to save us when you couldn't be here yourself." That evening, after the ceremony ended and the crowds dispersed, Sarah sat in her small apartment with Grace, sleeping in her crib, and Hope curled beside her on the couch. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Dr. Marcus holding a large manila envelope. "This came to the hospital today," he said quietly. "It's addressed to you. From Margaret Chen's daughter." Sarah's hands trembled as she took it. Her daughter? Lily Chen. She saw the news coverage of the ceremony. "She wanted you to have this." Sarah opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a letter, handwritten on cream-colored stationery, and a small photograph. The photo showed Margaret in her nurse's uniform, standing in the very lobby where the plaque now hung. She was smiling, vibrant, alive, full of purpose. But it was the date stamp in the corner that made Sarah's breath catch, the 10th of October 2024, 5 days before she died. With trembling hands, Sarah unfolded the letter. "Dear Sarah, my name is Lily Chen. Margaret Chen was my mother. I watched the ceremony today and cried for an hour straight, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude that my mother's story didn't end the way I thought it did. I need to tell you something that will change how you see everything that happened. 6 weeks before my mother died, she was diagnosed with advanced diabetic neuropathy. Her doctors told her the seizures were getting worse, that her time was limited. She knew she was dying. But here's what you don't know. Mom didn't adopt Hope as a puppy for companionship. She adopted Hope specifically to train her. She spent her final 6 weeks teaching Hope every emergency protocol she'd learned in 32 years as a nurse. I found her journal after she died. The last entry, written 3 days before her death, said this: "Hope is ready. I've taught her everything I can, how to recognize low blood sugar, how to fetch the medical bag, how to find help when I can't call for it. I know I won't survive my next crisis, but maybe, someday, Hope will use this training to save someone else. Maybe my death won't be the end of my purpose. Maybe it will just be the beginning of hers. Sarah's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the letter. My mother, Knew she was going to die, Sarah, and she spent her final weeks preparing Hope to save the life she knew she couldn't save herself her own. Hope wasn't just a pet. She was my mother's legacy project, her final patient, the one life she could still save after she was gone. And somehow, impossibly, Hope's training found you, a young mother, a diabetic, someone who needed exactly what my mother had spent her entire career providing: emergency intervention in a crisis. You asked in your interview whether Margaret would be proud of Hope. Sarah, I need you to understand something. My mother planned this. Not the specifics, not you personally, but the possibility. She trained Hope with the explicit hope that one day, someone, somewhere, would need exactly what Hope could provide. You weren't a random rescue. You were the answer to my mother's final prayer. In her will, Mom left instructions for Hope's care. She asked that Hope be adopted by someone who needs her as much as she needs them. The rescue didn't know the full context, but they honored her wishes. They chose you. And now, I understand why. Thank you for loving Hope the way my mother did. Thank you for giving her a second chance to be the hero Mom always knew she could be. And thank you for proving that my mother's life and her death meant something eternal. With deepest gratitude, Lily Chen P.S. I'm enclosing Mom's training journal. It belongs with Hope now. She earned it. Sarah couldn't see through her tears. The letter slipped from her fingers as sobs overtook her completely. Hope, sensing her distress, climbed into her lap and pressed her nose against Sarah's wet cheek. She knew, Sarah whispered into Hope's fur. Margaret knew she was dying, and she spent her last days teaching you to save someone else. She turned her death into your purpose. Hope's tail wagged gently, as if to say, I know. I always knew. Sarah looked at the photograph of Margaret one more time, this vibrant, brilliant woman who'd faced death with such grace that she'd used it to save a stranger's life 6 months later. I promise, Sarah whispered to the photo. I'll make sure Hope's story is told. I'll make sure people know what you did. I'll make sure your legacy lives forever. And in that moment, as Hope settled into Sarah's arms and Grace stirred softly in her crib, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not just gratitude. Not just relief, but purpose. Margaret had spent her final weeks preparing Hope to save a life. Now Sarah would spend the rest of hers making sure the world knew that love, true, selfless, boundless love, doesn't end with death. It just finds 4 paws and runs 12 miles through the darkness to prove that hope never dies. It just gets passed forward, one heartbeat at a time. 6 months later, Sarah stood at a podium in a packed auditorium, Hope sitting calmly beside her. Grace babbled happily in a front-row seat held by Emily, who'd become like family. "This is the Sarah Mitchell Foundation," Sarah said, her voice steady and strong. "We provide free diabetic emergency kits to at-risk individuals, free medical alert dogs to families in need, and free training for animals whose owners want to prepare them for medical emergencies." She looked down at Hope, whose tail wagged. Margaret Chen believed that love is the most powerful medicine we have, that even in death, we can still save lives if we prepare the ones we love to carry our purpose forward. Sarah smiled through tears. Hope carried that purpose 12 miles. Now we're going to carry it around the world. The audience erupted in applause. And somewhere in a place beyond time, beyond pain, beyond the limits of this life, Margaret Chen watched her puppy become a symbol of hope for thousands. Her training had saved one life, but her legacy would save countless more, because some bonds refuse to break, some love refuses to end, and some heroes have four paws, a brave heart, and a purpose that outlives death itself. If this story moved you, subscribe to Echoes the Dog, because every dog has a story that can change the world. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment with your dog's name, and remember, the love you give today might just save a life tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Now go hug your dog. They're carrying more love than we'll ever fully understand.